Shalom, shalom, everybody. We are back from our lunch break, and we're going to jump straight into our prophets, where we're going to look at Yirmeyahu 7 from verse 21 to 8, verse 3. And we're going to continue with our theme of worship and that which Yahweh has appointed according to his pattern, and then look at examples of what happens when people deviate from that pattern, and hear the clear warnings against deviation and the encouragements of staying according to the pattern. So, Yirmeyahu 7 verse 21 to 8 verse 3. Who's reading?
Thus said Yahweh of hosts, the Elohim of Israel, add your ascending offerings to your slaughterings and eat meat. For I did not speak to your fathers, or command them in the day that I brought them out of the land of Mizraim, about matters of ascending offerings or slaughterings. But this word I did command them, saying, Obey my voice, and I shall be your Elohim, and you be my people. And walk in all the ways that I have commanded you, so that it be well with you. But they did not obey or incline their ear, but walked in the counsels, in the stubbornness of their evil heart, and went backward and not forward. From the day that your fathers came out of the land of Mizraim until this day, I have even sent to you all my servants the prophets, daily rising up early and sending them. But they did not obey me or incline their ear, but stiffened their neck. They did evil more than their fathers. And you shall speak all these words to them, though they do not listen to you, and you shall also call to them, though they do not answer you. But you shall say to them, This is a nation that did not obey the voice of Yahweh, their Elohim, nor did they accept instruction. Truth has perished and has been cut off from their mouth. Cut off your hair and throw it away, and take up a lamentation on the bare heights. For Yahweh has rejected and forsaken the generation of his wrath. For the children of Yehudah have done what is evil in my eyes, declares Yahweh. They have set their abominations in the house which is called by my name, to defile it. And they have built the high places of Topheth, which is in the valley of the son of Hinnom, to burn their sons and their daughters in the fire, which I did not command, nor did it come into my heart. Therefore see, the days are coming, declares Yahweh, when it shall no longer be called Topheth, or the valley of the son of Hinnom, but the valley of slaughter, for they shall bury in Topheth until no room is left. And the corpses of this people shall be food for the birds of the heavens and for the beasts of the earth, with none to frighten them away. And in the cities of Yehudah and in the streets of Jerusalem I shall make to cease the voice of rejoicing and the voice of gladness, the voice of the bridegroom and the voice of the bride, for the land shall become a waste. At that time, declares Yahweh, they shall bring the bones of the sovereigns of Yehudah, and the bones of its heads, and the bones of the priests, and the bones of the prophets, and the bones of the inhabitants of Jerusalem out of their burial sites, and shall spread them before the sun and the moon and all the host of the heavens, which they have loved and which they have served, and after which they have walked, which they have sought, and to which they have bowed themselves. They shall not be gathered nor buried, they shall be for dung on the face of the earth. And death shall be preferred to life by all the rest of those who remain of this evil people, who remain in all the places where I have driven them, declares Yahweh of hosts.
Yes, let's just get back there. Chapter 9, let me get there. 23 and 24, coming up. Yeah.
Thus said Yahweh, Let not the wise boast in his wisdom, let not the mighty boast in his might, nor let the rich boast in his riches, but let him who boast of this, that he understands and knows me, that I am Yahweh, doing loving commitment, right ruling, and righteousness in the earth, for in these I delight, declares Yahweh.
Okay, so in light of us having just been through the last 2 weeks of Vayikra, looking at the slaughterings that help us understand how we draw near to the Master today, looking at all the Torah of each of those offerings and the ordination of the priesthood. So the tabernacle was set up for service, to service according to Yahweh's clear design. And what we see is that's a design that's set, that's the blueprint, that's how it should be done. Over many centuries, we've seen how this pattern has been corrupted. We even got historical records of Yahweh rebuking Israel and Yehuda for their abomination and their corrupt worship. A passage which is quite worth mentioning, especially in light of what we just read in Yirmeyahu, is from Amos chapter 5, verse 21 to 23, where it says, I have despised your festivals, and I am not pleased with your assemblies. Though you offer me ascending offerings and your grain offerings, I do not accept them. Nor do I look on your fattened peace offerings. Take away from me the noise of your songs, for I do not hear the sound of your stringed instruments. These words were part of a very severe rebuke that Yahweh gave to Israel because they corrupted their worship. And what was being brought before Yahweh was not the way he designed, the way he commanded through Moshe. And the state of the depravity that Israel was in at that point was in no way the way Yahweh had called for. It was in no way the way Yahweh had said, this is how you worship me. And so then the day of Yahweh, that they were all claiming, oh, the day of Yahweh, it wasn't the day that actually they should be longing for because of the state of their worship. Yahweh expressed very clearly how he hated their festivals. You see, when he says, I hated your festivals, it's clear language which highlights, it might have been on the same days. I mean, today we can apply that to wrong sun worship days, etc., which is part of that, because anything that deviates from Yahweh's pattern is not Yahweh's appointments anymore. It's not Yahweh's festivals. It's man-made festivals. And so it's abundantly clear that obedience to his commands was being utterly neglected. And the call to put away false worship, to learn right ruling, to be righteous, and let righteousness be administered was being made very clear. And anybody who refused to do that would result in being put into exile and being rejected by Yahweh. And this same call this is a living word. This same call is still very much alive for us today in this call for people to return to obedience. I want to say obedience, proper obedience, because anything that's not proper obedience is disobedience. And it's still very loud today because our master said the true worshippers will worship the Father in spirit and truth, which means there's a lot of false worshippers out there because they're not worshiping in truth. They think it's truth, but truth and spirit it's the same. It's the spirit of the truth. That's Yahweh's spirit. And the truth, Yahweh is the truth. He came in the flesh of man. He showed us how to walk. And looking in light of the Torah commentary that we've been through today, we see this passage as another, in Yirmeyahu, as another clear rebuke for corrupted worship. And so you see Amos, words of rebuke. Yechezkiel, Yeshayahu, Yirmeyahu carries a lot because Yirmeyahu had to deal with a lot of people neglecting Yahweh, and he kept telling them, you're not doing it right. Nobody would listen. And so we need to recognize that the presentation of any mixing, any form of worship that's done outside of Yahweh's clear system, clear pattern and boundaries is not worship at all in his eyes. It's not acceptable. And it's simply an abomination before his face. And I think that's what is sad, that so many people don't realize, if something is an abomination to you, you won't even consider doing it. That's why you think about when it talks about what we should eat, and it says that which has no fins and scales should be an abomination to you. I mean, they have a function, for instance, but it shouldn't be something that you should actually loathe it, that you don't even want to smell or think about eating it. It's just one example. It's the same thing with doing worship the wrong way. It shouldn't even be, oh yeah, no, it should be that, but that's the sad part of so many people today. So many people are bringing a corrupted form of worship through their tolerance and allowance of mixing and compromise. This passage that we've just read here now from Yirmeyahu 7 through to 8 verse 3, their compromised worship, Yahweh was rebuking severely. And he was giving a severe warning. And as we go through this passage, we are reminded of how we are to guard against corruption, guard against that mixing, those muddied waters, those tolerance of Isabel, those wormwood teachings that are corrupting people's attempt at bringing any kind of offering or trying to draw near to Yahweh. when all they're doing is syncretizing corrupted elements with the truth and deeming that to be acceptable before the eyes of Yahweh. Most are actually not taking the time to consider the possibility of their worship being abominable. Why? Because they cling to their syncretized ways. They won't even, a lot of people will say, yes, I know it's not in the word or in the Bible or in scripture, but we do this. So it's not even a thought, well, the fact that you said, I know it's not in there, it's like we looked was it last week or the week before when, it was last week, Yirmeyahu, is there not a lie in my right hand? In verse 21, we see Yahweh making it very clear that he is Yahweh, Elohim of hosts. And that in itself, whenever Yahweh addressed through his prophets that he is Yahweh of hosts, or Yahweh Elohim of hosts, the Elohim of Israel, that already should have sent shockwaves into the ears of the hearers that they'd better listen, because this is an awakening blast to a backsliding people who had simply become drunk on the maddening adulteries of whoring with the nations. True set-apartness was not around. Despite their assumption of a form of worship being acceptable, Yahweh was saying, I don't accept it. So what you're carrying on with, I'm not accepting. And it comes back to the so-called good works of many, where Yahweh is saying the same thing. That means nothing to me. All these works, And so they'd corrupted themselves severely. And when we look at the term Yahweh of hosts, Yahweh Tsebaot, the Hebrew word for hosts comes from the root word tzava, which means army, warfare, conflict, coming from the verb tzava, which means to fight or to go to war. So we realize the one who's speaking these words is our commander. He's our chief. He's the one who fights for us. He's the one that we're supposed to be marching under, taking orders from. Sorry, getting very excited. My throat's running ahead of me. And we should be like diligent soldiers that receive instruction and obey. Don't go off on our own tangent and do whatever we feel like. Yehuda hadn't been walking in the fear of Yahweh, because if they were, they wouldn't have been rebuked by this. Their ways had become so corrupted. Remember, in the days of Yirmeyahu, it's Yehuda, because Israel, the house of Israel, has already gone into captivity. So we're dealing with the house of Yehuda that's more corrupt. They'd adopted their form of worship from the nations around them, the nations that they were supposed to destroy, the Asherim, the Baal worship sites, the corruption that they were supposed to break, smash down, burn, destroy. They actually adopted them. They'd fallen prey to the way of the nations, and as a result of this, the fear of Yahweh was completely lacking. It had been set aside. The fear of man had been adopted because it's what man wanted them to do, And corrupted ways of man-made worship had caused a nation to assume that this way of worshiping Yahweh would be acceptable to him. And think about it today. We don't have to look too far in the world today, echoed through Malachi, how the fear of Yahweh, where is that really today? Because if he is the Father, then where's his fear? And if he is Elohim, where's his esteem? Where is the true fear? Mishle 29 verse 25 says, the fear of man brings a snare, but whoever trusts in Yahweh is set on high. And isn't that what Shlomo was also addressing, and is still a major problem today, is that the fear of man is causing so many to stumble in their need and ability to trust Yahweh. So I mentioned earlier about if we see somebody breaking the Sabbath or attempting to break the Sabbath because they're afraid of what others might say if they don't do what they want them to do. That's the fear of man that's actually replacing a true fear and reverence of Yahweh. And an inability to properly fear Yahweh doesn't put trust in Yahweh, because when you trust in Yahweh, you will obey him and you won't fear what man can do to you, because you're not falling to their corrupted restrictions. So the Hebrew word for fear that Shlomo uses, where it says the fear of man, is charada. It means anxiety, terror, trembling. And it highlights the extreme terror, the extreme anxiety as a result of another man. And this can only bring a snare that will entrap you. And so the Torah of the wise is a fountain of life, but turning one away from the snares of death. So the way that you get out of the snares, which is the fear of man, is to be drinking from the fountain of life. And that is a metaphor or parable for coming to the Master, all who are thirsty, and drinking without cost, because he's provided everything we need. There are so many people lacking the true trust in Yahweh, and this rebuke that we see in Yirmeyahu 7, Yahweh tells Yehuda, increase your slaughterings, increase your offerings, and eat the meat, carry on. It wasn't a thumbs up that this is okay. This wasn't a positive command. It was a rebuke against the futility of their worship. What Yahweh was basically saying is, go ahead, do more of what you're doing. See if it's going to help you. They weren't obeying his voice, and despite their attempts at drawing near, because offerings were always a design of a way to draw near to Yahweh, their attempt at drawing near, and believe you me, they put a lot of effort into what they were doing corruptly. A lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of planning. I mean, it wasn't just, it was in terms of fleshly ways, they had spent a lot of energy doing things corruptly. And Yahweh said, carry on doing it. So many people today are offering a slaughtering of praise in a corrupted manner or form, where the tolerance of mixing is widely accepted, yet it doesn't line up with the plumb line of the word. It doesn't line up with the true set-apartness that befits the house. You see, synchronization or syncretization of worship doesn't befit the house. It's not fitting for the house of Yahweh. No amount of slaughterings would be able to satisfy, no matter how many they tried to bring, no matter how much they tried to perform a service unto Yahweh. Yahweh was saying, your performance is worthless. They'd set aside the need to be set apart. They allowed the corruptible things to be adhered to. And Yahweh commands obedience. He doesn't command rituals. That's the difference. The multiplication of sacrifices is pointless when they are brought without a proper attitude of obedience. When a proper attitude of obedience is the foundation, then multiple sacrifices are acceptable. Like when Shlomo built the temple and they had so many slaughterings that they had to get some of the Levites cleansed because there wasn't enough priests in service to do the slaughterings. That was accepted by Yahweh at the dedication of the temple because it was done from a basis of obedience. In verse 25, it makes it clear that in the day that he brought our fathers out of Mitzrayim, he didn't speak of slaughterings and offerings. He just said, obey my voice. And once you obey his voice, then he started giving instructions on slaughterings and offerings. So it's not that slaughterings and offerings were to be done away with, but it must be about obedience to his voice. In verse 26, he commanded them to obey his voice, and it all begins with obeying his voice. If you don't have ears to hear, if you're heaping up for yourself ear ticklers, you're never going to hear the true voice of Yahweh that breaks cedars, that makes the deer give birth, that shakes the wilderness. We know that Israel had come to Mount Sinai. They were given a clear marriage covenant and how to serve as a set-apart nation. They were given a prescribed manner on the slaughterings that were to be brought. And what we take note in verse 25, when it says, from the day that your fathers came out of the land, I sent to you all my servants, the prophets, daily rising early and sending them, and when we look at this, it's not a verse, these verses are not there to set aside the proper functioning part of necessary offerings, but it highlights that if obedience to his word is set aside and changed, then whatever offering is brought is rendered useless, it's rendered unacceptable. And so, as I keep saying, so many people today are falling into the same snare or trap. A clear example we'll touch on in Scripture quickly here of following your own way, thinking that you can do it your way, is in the account of the wicked King Shaul. Remember, he was clearly commanded to destroy Agag. He was commanded to destroy all the Amalekites and put everything under the ban. Now that means you don't take any spoil. Nothing is for you. So he keeps the best of the livestock, and he kept King Agag alive. And Shemuel comes along and he hears the flock of that which they took as spoils for their victory, and he rebuked Shaul for his rebellion. In 1 Samuel 15, verse 18 to 23, it says, "And Yahweh sent you on the way and said, Go, and you shall put under the ban the sinners, the Amalekites, and fight against them until they are consumed. And why did you not obey the voice of Yahweh, but swooped down on the spoil and did evil in the eyes of Yahweh?" And Shaul said to Shemuel, "I did obey the voice of Yahweh. And I went on the way on which Yahweh sent me and brought back Agag, sovereign of Amalek. I put Amalek under the ban, but the people took the spoil of the sheep and the cattle, the best of which should have been put under the ban, to slaughter to Yahweh, your Elohim, in Gilgal." Then Shemuel said, "Does Yahweh delight in ascending offerings and slaughterings, as in obeying the voice of Yahweh? Look, to obey is better than a slaughtering. To heed is better than the fat of rams. For rebellion is as the sin of divination, and stubbornness is as wickedness and idolatry. Because you have rejected the word of Yahweh, he also rejects you as sovereign." And that's said in the process of him losing the reign and Yahweh anointing David to become sovereign. So the one that the people asked for, Yahweh proved to say, "Look what you asked for," because it wasn't the right way. Now I'll bring one according to the right design. So this is a clear lesson on doing things your own way in an attempt of performing a worship unto Yahweh is actually just rebellion. And so many people are tiring themselves being rebels. As we read from here, Shaul claimed to obey the voice of Yahweh. His claim was false. You know, how many times have you ever heard things such as this? Might even have found yourself making these kind of statements. I know what the word says, but. I know what the word says about tithing, but. I know what the word says about keeping Shabbat, but. I know what the word says about throwing off things of the flesh, but. We could carry on for a number of hours on things that people have a big but about, in presenting their assumption of knowing the word. Capital B-U-T. Okay. The point I'm making here is that good intentions do not offset sin. Sin is sin, and as we read earlier and discovered earlier, sin is lawlessness. And divination and rebellion and wickedness and witchcraft and idolatry are all grouped in the same class. In verse 23, Shemuel tells us that rebellion in 1 Samuel 15, rebellion is as the sin of divination. So when you're deviating from the pattern, it's as if you're doing witchcraft. Divination was strictly forbidden within Israel. In fact, anyone who practices divination was to be put to death. And Yahweh makes it clear in his word that rebellion is no different to anyone who uses magic, conjures spells, or calls up the dead. So many people don't even consider witchcraft or divination as sin. And in the world today, it's like it's what can I say? It's something that people actually want to go see. They want to be entertained by it. And it's simply become an accepted religion or belief system by many, practicing dark magic, etc. And yet when we know that sin is lawlessness and witchcraft does not submit to the Torah of Elohim, to the rebellious, therefore, is no different than being a Satanist. That's to put it bluntly. And I remind you, when our master spoke to the religious Pharisees, he said to them that you are of the father, the devil, because you do what your father desires to do. You're a murderer. He was a murderer from the beginning. He's not stood in the truth because there's no truth in him. He speaks the lie. He speaks for his own, for he is the father. He's a liar and the father of it. Yeshua was basically calling the religious Pharisees, who actually thought they had authority over the word, he was calling them Satanists. Children of the devil. So many people have perished because of lack of knowledge, and they need to hear these words of warning against deviating from the plan. Yechezkel 44 verse 6 says, "And you shall say to the rebellious, to the house of Israel, thus said the Master Yahweh, O house of Israel, enough of these abominations of yours. enough excuses, enough buts. When we consider the depravity of rebellion and we assess it through the mirror of the word and look into our lives, we must make sure that we're not finding ourselves doing anything in word or deed that does not have the name of Yeshua Messiah being able to be fitly attached to it. The wicked King Shaul tried very hard to spiritualize his sin, saying, I did wrong, but it was for a valid reason. Isn't that what a lot of people do today? They try to almost present a spiritualized justification to simply not obeying the word and not doing what's called. Let me just make it clear. There's no reason whatsoever for doing anything wrong. I mean, you shouldn't be doing wrong, finished. And sometimes people think that when they attach some kind of spiritual significance to their wrong ways, that they make it seem like it's acceptable and it's okay. Shaul's corrupt attempt at worship was very severely rebuked by Yahweh, and he was rejected by Yahweh. Our master tells us, and we mention it many times, many are going to come and say, didn't we do this in your name? Didn't we cast out demons? Didn't we do these? Didn't we? I don't know you, you who work lawlessness. And when we look at this chapter, we are given a clear standard, what was being called for here by Yahweh's people. People that have confidence to call upon him. And there was a conditional clause that was given to the fathers that came out of Mitzrayim. It's still the same conditional clause to us today. And it is about obeying the voice, because he says, obey my voice and I will be your Elohim and you will be my people. You're not just automatically his people. He's not just automatically your Elohim if you're not obeying him. You see, he becomes our deliverer to those obeying him. And he became the causer of everlasting deliverance to those obeying him, we're told in Hebrews. So therefore, obedient people have the confident trust in knowing they have an Elohim, Yahweh of hosts, who is our Savior, Redeemer, and King. When we obey and when we walk in his ways, he promises that we will be his people and it will be well with us. The Hebrew word that's translated as obey in the phrase obey my voice is shimu. And it comes from shema, which means to hear with attention, comprehend, discern. We've all heard the word shema, which, when we talk about hear, guard, and do, we understand one thing, that in order to properly hear, we need to be looking to the master, because, our ears and eyes are well connected. They should be. Because what you're looking at is what you'll be listening to. What you lend your ear to is what you'll be following, because you'll go the way you're looking to. So what and who are you looking and listening to is an important question that many should be able to answer today. When Shaul says that there'll be a time where they won't bear sound teaching, but according to their own desires, they'll heap up for themselves teachers tickling their ear, and they will indeed turn their ears away from the truth and be turned aside to myths. Isn't that what's happening? Turning away from the truth in order to listen to what you want to hear to justify rebellion at the end of the day. Mishle 28 verse 9 says, he who turns his ear away from the hearing of the Torah, even his prayer is an abomination. This is a parable that warns against not having ears to hear what the Torah is saying. Because when you don't hear what the Torah is saying, you never get the blueprint on how to actually serve. So then you'll end up serving how you think you should serve. And that's a very dangerous thing for any man to be in, If you don't follow a pattern that's set apart and pure, you'll end up devising your own pattern. And while in your eyes it might look like the pattern, put next to the clear pattern of the word, it will be shown up as false. And Kepha teaches us that we are to be obedient children. He says in 1 Peter 1 verse 13 to 16, having girded up the loins of your mind, I read this earlier, being sober, set your expectation firmly upon the favor that is to be brought to you at the revelation of Yeshua Messiah, as obedient children, not conforming yourselves to the former lusts in your ignorance, instead, as the one who called you is set apart, so you also should be set apart in all behavior, because it has been written, be set apart, because I am set apart. When Kepha says we must be obedient children, the Greek word for obedient is hupokeo, which we spoke of earlier, which really is to submit to hearing. Be in subjection to hearing. So if you're refusing to hear, you can never be an obedient child. You will never be one that overcomes and can become a son of Elohim and he become a father to you. Obedient children of Elohim pay attention to his voice. They diligently obey the voice of Yahweh. We spoke about the voice of Yahweh a couple of weeks ago. But as it comes back to who are you looking to, we are to be looking to the Prince and Perfecter of our belief. The question also is, are you listening? Are you following? He says, my sheep hear my voice and I know them and they follow me. Yirmeyahu 7 verse 23, Yahweh makes it clear the conditional clause of being determined as a set-apart people that obey his voice, as they are children who walk in obedience to his commands. Walk in his ways as he has commanded us, and it will go well with us. I mean, isn't that what we want? You know, Devarim 28 and 29 gives us the clear blessings for obedience, curses for disobedience. Renee's saying Christians today will look at the story of Agag and see the Creator seeks not your acts of slaughter, but look past the fact that the prophet demonstrates that discipline is wanted. Okay, discipline niece. I don't know. Discipline, EIS at the end. I don't know. Okay, Renee, you'll have to. Oh, discipline is wanted. No, you didn't put a space there. I thought you were mixing German in there. Okay, so the Creator seeks not your acts of slaughter, but look past the fact that the prophet demonstrates that discipline is wanted. Yeah, he's saying that most Christians today will say, yeah, he's not looking for your acts of slaughter. No, we spoke, you're right. Now I get what you're saying, Renee. Thank you. He just wrote again, discipline is, yes. Okay, so part of being disciplined is bringing the proper slaughterings that's required. And as we are to be a daily living offering, because in the mindset of the folly of fools, if you follow their way of thinking, which is a folly way, and say, okay, no slaughterings needed, so he doesn't require slaughterings, how do you interpret the renewed writings to be a daily living slaughtering, to offer praise? How do you appropriate, what does that mean? How do you then bring that together in understanding what it means to obey? You know, if we stay in Messiah and walk as he walked, then we have the full assurance that he stays in us and we will be guarded and protected. Without the commands of Elohim, we have no direction. You know, in verse 23, when it says, obey my voice, and he says, so that it will be well with you. You know, it's a wonderful promise. The Hebrew word for well is yatav. It means to be good, well, glad, or pleasing, and it carries the understanding of being in a state of having the proper characteristics or performing an expected function of the one who's requiring it of you. When we walk in the ways of Elohim, we'll be performing the expected functions. So then he can look at us and say, well done, good and faithful servant. In other words, like in creation week, he saw that it was good. When we deviate from the commands, we become crooked, defiled. And that's what Israel had done here in their worship, or the house of Yehudah. Yahweh reminds us that they did not obey, they didn't incline their ears to the commands of Elohim, but walked in their own counsels, in the stubbornness of their wicked and evil hearts. They went backwards and not forwards. Now, the Hebrew words translated as counsels is moetzah, and it means counsel, plan, or devise. Comes from a verb ya'atz, which means counsel, counselor, give advice. And the reason I'm mentioning this word ya'atz as counselor is because this is the word that's used to describe our master. In Yirmeyahu 9 verse 6, when it says, a child will be born unto us, a son will be given unto us, and the rule is on his shoulder. And his name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, Ya'atz, Strong El, Father of Continuity, Prince of Peace. From this, we get wonderful confirmation in Scripture that the only true and perfect counsel that we have is of Elohim. And the true counselor is our great master in Elohim, Yeshua Messiah. And when we don't follow his clear plan, his clear counsel, as given through his word, then we'll end up listening to false counsel that will lead one astray. People sometimes are their own counsel, which is even worse, you know. Anyone who claims to serve Yahweh without walking in his Torah are making a false claim, and they're going to be rebuked, they're going to be rejected. The thoughts of the righteous are right ruling, Mishle 12 verse 5. The counsels of the wrong are deceit. In other words, when the counsels of the wrong are done, they're thinking of these counsels that are leading in the way they want to go. But here, the opposite to that, this parable says, but the thoughts of the righteous, in other words, what you're meditating on, is right ruling. Because a true righteous one wants to think about how to do what's right, where the wrong are just getting counsels in deceit, the deceit of lawlessness, because tickle my ear and tell me it's okay what I'm doing. That's what Shaul tried to get away with. And so we understand this clear picture that Yahweh is making before us, that he knows the thoughts of man, that it's in his man's heart to do evil continually. And anybody that seeks their own counsel and refuses the proper counsel of the commands of Elohim are simply walking in the stubbornness of their evil hearts, and it shows that the word of Yahweh is not upon their hearts. The Hebrew word is translated as stubbornness in Yirmeyahu 7 verse 24 is sheri'uth, or sheri'uth, means stubbornness, hardness, firmness. And it comes from the verb sharar, which actually means enemy or adversary. So tying this in with the warning we get in the renewed writings, you know, if you make yourself a friend of the world, you make yourself an enemy of Elohim. Because that's stubbornness that will make you resist obedience to Yahweh. The word for stubbornness is used 10 times in Scripture. It's used first in Devarim 20:19, verse 19, and then it's used once in the Psalms, and 8 times it's used in the book of Yirmeyahu. Now, Yirmeyahu had to deal with a lot of stubborn people. You know, Tehillah 81 says, my people, verse 11 to 14, my people did not listen to my voice, and Israel would not submit to me. So I gave them over to their own stubborn heart to walk in their own counsels. Oh, if my people had listened to me, Israel would walk in my ways. I would subdue their enemies at once and turn my hand against their adversaries. I'm mentioning all these verses to tie in context with what we're reading here today. We need to understand the context of the words here, because Yahweh was saying, people aren't listening and obeying. Oh, if they'd just listen, I'd actually destroy their enemies. But they're being destroyed because they're not obeying. If people would just listen to Elohim and walk in his ways, it's as simple as that. 2 Thessalonians 2 verse 9 to 12, Shaul says, the coming of the lawless one is according to the working of Satan, with all power and signs and wonders of falsehood, and with all deceit of unrighteousness in those perishing, because they did not receive a love for the truth in order for them to be saved. And for this reason, Elohim sends them a working of delusion for them to believe the falsehood, in order that all should be judged who did not believe the truth, but have delighted in the unrighteousness. Now, in context of what we're reading, these words of Shaul are pretty clear words of rebuke for many who are claiming a no-law approach. A couple other passages in Yirmeyahu just want to mention because it's nice to tie them in together. In Yirmeyahu 11, verse 7 to 8, it says, I earnestly warned your fathers in the day that I brought them out of the land of Mitzrayim, until this day, rising early in warning, saying, obey my voice. But they did not obey or incline their ear, but everyone walked in the stubbornness of his evil heart. So I brought on them all the words of this covenant which I commanded them to do, and they did not do. In chapter 13, verse 9 to 10, it said, thus said Yahweh, thus I ruin the pride of Yehudah and the great pride of Jerusalem. This evil people who refuse to hear my words, who walk in the stubbornness of their heart, and walk after other mighty ones to serve them and bow themselves to them, is like this girdle which is completely useless. Remember, he was told to bury a girdle by the Euphrates, and then after a while he had to go and dig it up again. It was all useless, and Yahweh said that's exactly. And what's the girdle as a picture of? In terms of the armor of Elohim? The belt of truth, the sash that would hold Aharon's high priest garments together. And therefore, it was a picture that Israel had discarded truth and followed falsehood. Yirmeyahu 16, it says, it shall be when you declare to all this people all these words, and they shall say to you, why has Yahweh pronounced all this great evil against us? And what is our crookedness? And what is our sin that we've committed against Yahweh, our Elohim? Notice how most times when people are wrong, they don't know they're wrong. They claim like, I don't know I've been wrong. Why? Then you shall say to them, because your fathers have forsaken me, declares Yahweh, and have walked after other mighty ones and served them and bowed themselves to them and forsaken me and did not guard my Torah. You have done more evil than your fathers. For look, each one walks according to the stubbornness of his own evil heart, without listening to me. So I shall throw you out of this land into a land that you do not know, neither you nor your fathers, and there you shall serve other mighty ones day and night, where I show you no favor. Yirmeyahu 18 says, and now speak to the men of Yehuda and to the inhabitants of Jerusalem, saying, thus said Yahweh, see, I am forming evil and devising a plan against you. Return now everyone from his evil way and make your ways and your deeds good. But they shall say, it is of no use. For we walk according to our own plans, and we do each one the stubbornness of his evil heart. And isn't that exactly what so many people are doing today? They don't want to listen to any call back to obedience. Yirmeyahu 23, it says, thus said Yahweh of hosts, do not listen to the words of the prophets who prophesy to you. They lead you astray. They speak a vision of their own heart, not from the mouth of Yahweh. They keep on saying to those who despise me, Yahweh said you'll have peace. And to all who walk according to the stubbornness of their own heart, no evil comes upon you. For who has stood in the counsel of Yahweh and has been seen and heard his word? Who has listened to his word and obeyed it? And the fact is, nobody at that stage has. When he looked upon the earth, there wasn't a righteous one. And when one goes through all these passages that I've just mentioned from Yirmeyahu, it becomes clear how stubborn-hearted the people had become. And those who flatter themselves into assuming that the curses have no effect on their lives, they're just adding drunkenness to thirst. You know, it's the state of many who are gulping away at the poison of wormwood, and they can never be sober in their understanding or in their reasoning. And in Yirmeyahu 7 verse 27, we are clearly told, he was told to speak all these words even if people will not listen. He was to call to them even though they will not respond. And now that's a tough challenge. It's the same thing that we've got today when it says the Spirit and the bride says, come. We are to be calling people out. I can guarantee you today, most people are not going to listen and not want to hear what you have to say. But don't stop. Yeshayahu was told the same thing. Until destruction comes, you keep speaking. I said earlier today, when you've got a story, when you've got good news to share, don't hold it back. And part of that good news is, this is good news. Come back to a Elohim who wants to clean you, who wants to show his compassion upon you, who wants to restore you. Stubborn hearts that follow their own counsels, rendering their own form of worship before the eyes of Yahweh, is not acceptable to him. And just as Yirmeyahu, Yeshayahu, Yechezkiel, all the prophets that he rose early sending them were called to speak and nobody listened, he's still calling all of us to stand up and speak. In whatever circles and influences or places of influence we might have. Because one of the things that we need to take note of here is our master is a jealous Elohim. And he doesn't want the praise of idols in our lives, you know. And we need to get disciplined in the word, because without him, we have no hope. Sometimes Yahweh told some of these prophets to do some things that it seems very strange, but it was for good reason. I mean, he tells this prophet to cut off his hair and throw it away as a sign of a rebuke that Yahweh was giving to a very stubborn people, that this was actually a sign of a removal of their protection. So by him cutting his hair and throwing it away, he's saying, I'm removing my covering from you. How serious this is when Yahweh says, I reject you. Hosea says, my people have perished for lack of knowledge. Now, a lot of people just stop there. They don't carry on. It says, because you have rejected knowledge, I reject you from being priest to me. Since you have forgotten the Torah of your Elohim, I also forget your children. So there isn't even protection over the children, because it's, again, the curse that's coming down to the third and fourth generation of those who do not love Yahweh, but hate him. Refuse, reject, despise, and cast away the words of Elohim, and he'll do the same to you. And he makes a clear statement of judgment here when he says, you know, they're going to bring out all the bones of all the people, and they're going to spread them out in the valley, and the corpses of those people are going to be birds, they're going to be food for the birds of the heavens and for the beasts of the earth, with none to frighten them away. This is covenant language. When Yahweh made covenant with Abraham, I think Bereshit 15, is it? Yeah. And the birds of prey in verse 11 came down on the carcasses, and Avram drove them away.
So that was the covenant offering.
Yes.
I mean, if you're a carcass from the field, there's no more.
No, then there's no.
If you frighten the birds away.
There's no covenant to be protecting you.
Yeah.
And even our master, when he makes it very clear that he gives a clear parable. I love the one in Luke. It says, in that night, two shall be in one bed, the one shall be taken, the other shall be left. Two shall be grinding together, one shall be taken, the other left. Two shall be in the field, the one shall be taken, and the other left. And they answering said to him, where, master? And he said, where the body is, there also the eagles shall be gathered together. This was a clear picture of a separation of the wicked out from the righteous, and being handed over to the feast of the birds and the beasts is judgment language for the end time judgment upon the disobedient. And one of the curses for disobedience in Devarim 28:29 is that you will have nobody to frighten the birds away. You won't have Abraham as a father in a sense of covenant giving you something that protects you. Because why are we in covenant? We're in covenant by the blood of Messiah, but that covenant gives assurances of protection. But there's reciprocal responsibilities to maintain one's covenant relationship. And when you break that covenant relationship, you leave yourself exposed to being handed over for judgment, for which Yahweh has appointed the beasts and the birds to devour the wicked. Did you want to share something? You know, in the day of the wrath of Elohim, he'll cause the voice of rejoicing and gladness to cease. And it highlights a picture of those who are continually going on with life as usual. Our master says the last days will be as in the days of Noah, where they were just carrying on. Eating, drinking, carrying on, giving in marriage. It's like nothing's changed. Then the flood came. And that's how the coming of the Son of Adam be. But Shaul writes to the believers in Thessalonica about the coming of Messiah. I don't need to let you know. I don't need to teach you, because you know. But I'm warning you about the coming of the lawless one that's going to draw people away with all the little works of magic and signs and woo, you know. And people that aren't able to rightly divide the truth, how are they going to know then what they are following or listening to is an imposter or not? One thing that we need to make very clear is that when we look at this, when we look at all these passages that we're reading about slaughterings and drawing near to Yahweh, and these rebukes that are given, this is what Yahweh is saying. He's coming for a ready bride. And those that are stubborn, those that have fallen away, they're going to be handed over to another table for the beasts and the birds. And they're not going to sit at his table and feast with him. There are so many Torah observant groups today that I fear are also corrupting their worship. Just look, this wasn't the Amalekites, it wasn't the Philistines, it wasn't the Canaanites. This was a covenanted people that Yahweh was rebuking here. All the renewed writing letters that we get of Shaul and Kepha and Yaakov. They're written to believers. And the warnings that are given. It's the same today. There's a lot of Torah observant groups today that are actually mixing their worship. A lot of Torah teachers disregarding the command to not shave their beards. And yet somehow clean-shaven Torah teachers are being listened to. Shouldn't be, because it's not the pattern. Some say it doesn't matter, but I want to remind you, it does matter. What gives you the right to say what Elohim says doesn't matter? That was what Shaul thought. What about those wearing kippahs? I mean, I'm getting into small little details, but actually big problems. What about those not wearing tzitzits or not putting blue in their tzitzits, but yet they're claiming to be teachers and leading other people because people are believing what they're being taught because it sounds right because you're quoting a couple of verses. What about those that are corrupting the name of Yahweh? Substituting his name with idol names on their lips and appropriating that as worship to Yahweh. That's corrupt worship that Yehuda was doing in incorporating Baal and Ashtoreth and Molech, the mighty ones of the nations. So I'll speak it as it is for today's language. Torah groups today that are still claiming that Yahweh is God and Lord is a corrupt form of worship. And if you're listening to people like that, hear this rebuke today and turn back to Yahweh and find comfort, as we read in chapter 9, where it says, verse 23 and 24, don't make a boast in your own wisdom, think, oh, I know it better. Boast that you know Yahweh. Because he's doing loving commitment and right ruling in the earth. And that's what he delights in. So don't say, oh, yes, I know what you're saying, but you don't know what these guys are saying. Oh, I've learned so much from them. Have you? Have you not just learned corrupt worship? Think about the many people that didn't want to listen to Yirmeyahu in this day. And I know most people aren't going to want to hear what we're saying in separating a clear-cut picture of what is pure worship and what is corrupted worship. This passage highlights the danger of the abomination of corrupt worship. And it's important for us to do what's right in Yahweh's eyes, not what we think is good for us, because, I'd like to learn a bit of history here. Oh, and this one, I know he uses wrong titles, and I know he says it's whatever, but you've got to hear what he says. No, you don't got to hear what he says. That should be a red flag for you. When we look at this passage that forms the basis of identifying corrupt worship versus what we saw in the Torah as the law of all the offerings, Yahweh was clearly showing a people who should have known better that they were very wrong. And isn't that the same problems today that we see by a lot of people? I want to tell you, Yahweh hates mixed worship. Amos 5, we started with, I've hated your festivals. I've despised your festivals. Yirmeyahu 1 verse 11 to 15, that's the opening chapter of the book of Yirmeyahu, and he was rebuking Israel for falling away, for becoming an apostate bride. And he says, of what use are your many slaughterings, declares Yahweh. I've had enough of your sending offerings of rams and the fat of fed beasts. I do not delight in the blood of bulls or lambs or goats. When you come to appear before me, who's required this from your hand, to trample my courtyards? Stop bringing futile offerings. Incense, it's an abomination to me. New moons, Sabbaths, the calling of gatherings. I am unable to bear righteousness and and assembly. My being hates your new moons and your appointed times. They are a trouble to me. I am weary of bearing them. And when you spread out your hands, I hide my eyes from you. Even though you make many prayers, I do not hear. Your hands have become filled with blood. A lot of people have taken this passage to say, you see why you want to keep the Sabbaths and feasts. You see, Yahweh doesn't like them anymore. That's wormwood teaching. What Yahweh was saying is, I hate the way you're drawing near to me your way. Because everything that you're doing is a waste of time. Because you've gone away from the simple, obedient way of listening to Yahweh. Yehuda were bringing slaughterings and offerings as the temple service was still going on. And Yahweh was basically saying to them, why are you even coming with your offerings, since you've got idols in your homes? And all you're doing is bringing mud into my house, and your feet are filled with mud, and you're just walking in falsehood. And isn't that what a lot of people are doing today? So what Yahweh is saying through his word, and it's still allowed today, stop mixing your assumed worship unto Yahweh with paganism, which Yahweh hates. That's how Yehuda were carrying out their feasts. And that is what turned their festivals into something that Yahweh hated, because they turned it into a creation of their own hands, their own ways, doing whatever suited them. And in the process, they mixed in the corruption of the nations. And it was a product of Bilam teaching Balak how to infuse that as well. They were delighting in their abominations. Isn't that what a lot of people are doing today? They delight themselves in the depravity of rebellion. Their own disgusting ways are in their hearts, whereas the true worshippers who worship the Father in spirit and truth, Yahweh's ways are always in their heart. Tehillah 84 verse 5 says, blessed is the man whose strength is in you, your highways are in their heart. Our worship and the way we approach Yahweh, because our life is a worship. It's not just what we sing for a few minutes as entrance into his presence. Our life is a worship. Now, part of that worship includes song and praise and psalms of praise and thanksgiving. But our worship will reflect what ways are in our heart, whether it's our own corrupt ways, doing our own ways, what's right in our own eyes, or if the highways of set apartness of Yahweh are in our heart. So this is a warning against that which will keep you out. Did you want to share anything else? Okay, I know it sounds very doom and gloom, but this is so important for us today. In the mirror and contrast picture of, we just spoke earlier before lunch about this unique special day of Aaron and his sons being dressed and like it's ready and keeping that fire burning. And we come a few generations later and we see Yahweh rebuking this service. And this is why he found fault with them, not his called for service, but with the people who were administering their own ways rather than the set apartness of his service.
I read the one thing that said he wanted them to just obey him.
Yes.
And then there was need for sacrifices. Didn't just. Then the instructions started on, okay, you need to sacrifice now. This is how you do it when you have to do it.
Yes.
It wasn't if you know what I mean. There was just obey me.
Yes.
But now there's a need for sacrifices. Now I have to teach you how you go about that.
Yeah.
So that's why he said, I just said, just obey me.
Yeah.
So isn't it proof? I mean, you always knows things. He makes a way.
Yes. And the fact that nobody can stand and say, but I didn't have a choice, or I didn't have a, because Yahweh's, he knows the end from the beginning. He's provided the means for anyone to come back to him. But you just got to obey.
Because that was what Levi was as well. I mean, he says Abraham was his prophet, Noah was, they were all prophets before there was ever Levites.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
But they all sacrificed Yahweh.
Yes.
They all knew how to do it. Now he had to choose a people, because people were just doing whatever they thought, to instruct the nation and to be a light to them. It wasn't a new thing.
No.
And it's not a new thing now.
No.
There are people that must teach other people.
Yes.
Because Jack and I were having a little conversation over lunch over how people just follow the masses and nobody thinks about what they're doing.
Mm-mm.
And that's where the problem is.
They just go with the flow.
Yeah. You're not considering, and this is what the prophets keep saying to the people as well, consider what you're doing.
Yes.
Don't just follow blindly about what you're doing. So you need some people to
help you think.
Help you think. Yes.
Yeah.
It's not new.
No.
It's not suddenly there must be teachers and evangelists. I mean, these guys were that too.
Yes. Yes. In actual fact, the command.
Teacher,
yes. The command was to obey the Levites, who instruct you and do what they tell you. So it's the same thing today. The difference, I think, maybe just touching on that, because we had a question before lunch. The order of the priesthood and its service changed for one simple reason, and that was the priests who were supposed to be administering the pattern of the service corrupted their way, as we'll learn next week already with the first lot, Nadav and Avihu. So the pattern of the Levitical priesthood, remember, the firstborn were always Yahweh, but Yahweh then chose Levi in the place of the firstborn, because the firstborn were always going to be the ones that lead and instruct the rest of the family. That's how it was designed. So he chose the Levites in the place of the firstborn, because the Levites are the ones who stood up. But he already prophesied this before they even left Mitzrayim, when Yaakov gave blessing to Levi. So it's not like Yahweh changes his mind. He already has a perfect plan in place. So the removal of the Levitical priesthood was not a oops by Yahweh. It's a perfect a fulfillment of a revelation of who we are in Messiah. Because the Levitical priesthood and pattern under the commands of Moshe was a reflection of that which is in the heavens. So it was always something that was pointing toward what we have in Messiah when he would come here on earth and bring a change in the priesthood. The book of Hebrews talks about the change that was needed. And that change brought about a functional change whereby Shaul explains now Yahweh is appointed. So it's not the Levites instead of the firstborn. He's appointed some to equip the body. So if we want to say, for better expressions today, the Levites of today, within understanding the pattern in Melchizedek, are those that the master has appointed to equip the body. And that is a gift of service that he calls, like he gave the service as a gift to Aharon and the Levites. It was their gift. So too has he gifted some to equip the rest of the body to maturity. Now, we can call it threefold, fourfold, fivefold, doesn't matter. The fact is, there are those that are appointed that will lead, instruct, and teach you in the way. Hebrews makes it very clear, as a letter to the Hebrews, or the believers that was spread across in the dispersion. The whole book of Hebrews is about now what we have in the order of Melchizedek. And in chapter 13 at the end, it says twice, you better obey those leading you. Just as Israel was supposed to obey what the Levites instructed them in. It hasn't changed. The pattern has not changed. The functionality has changed through the understanding of the blood of Messiah now gives us access, not just once a year, but that doesn't remove away the responsibility that we still have to uphold the clear standard of set apartness within the body. So I hope that helps us understand that our ability, when we look at all these slaughterings and wrong slaughterings, it's still the same rebukes today, because people drawing near to Yahweh in their approach at worship, if it's not done in obedience to his word, and obedience begins with a proper calling on his name, the proper observance of Sabbath, feasts, dietary laws, just to name a few, wearing tzitzits, men not shaving their beards, men not covering their heads while praying or prophesying. These are just a couple of basic starters that is milk of the word, so to speak, before you even get into the meat of it. A lot of people think they're eating meat, yet they're struggling over why you should wear tzitzit. Or they're debating whether it's okay for a guy to shave his upper lip or to make a goatee or to shave completely. I mean, if people are arguing about that, then you must know they still need milk. And sadly, many are listening to those that actually still need milk. So what are they giving? They're giving regurgitated milk. And they're not helping people grow. It sounds gross, and it's for good reason, because we need a wake-up call today. You know? So when we look at this, on the other side, when we see Yahweh's commitment, he's making it clear, don't let the wise boast in his own wisdom. Boast that you understand and know me. Now, you can only understand and know him. By this we know that we know him when we guard his commands. And we are to, with all our getting, get understanding, get wisdom, get understanding. Understanding comes in the proper doing. If Yehuda were doing what they should have been doing, they would have understood why what they were attempting to do was abominable. And Yahweh is doing right, loving commitment and right ruling. This is for me, showing Yahweh still, through his prophet, is showing how compassionate he is. I mean, he could have just wiped everybody out like he did in the flood. But he's compassionate to his commitment to Abraham. And you know how compassionate his loving, when he says his loving commitment is everlasting, he means it. Because generations later, Yahweh is still remaining committed to what he said to Avram, that there would be a covering protection for those that stay in him. But if you're not in him, it's clear, just as he said to Avram, you won't have anybody to frighten the birds away because judgment is coming. Let's go into Mark 7, verse 31 to 8:38. Right.
And again, going out from the borders of Tor and Sidon, he came to the Sea of Galilee through the midst of the borders of Decapolis. And they brought to him one who was deaf and spoke with difficulty, and they begged him to lay his hand upon him. And taking him away from the crowd, he put his fingers in his ears, and having spit, he touched his tongue. And looking up to the heaven, he sighed and said to him, Ephphatha, that is, be opened. And immediately his ears were opened, and the binding of his tongue was loosed, and he was speaking plainly. And he ordered them that they should say it to no one. But the more he ordered them, the more they published it. And they were immeasurably astonished, saying, He has done all well. He makes even the deaf to hear and the dumb to speak. In those days, the crowd being very great, and not having any to eat, Yahshua called his taught ones near, and said to them, I have compassion on the crowd, for they have now been with me 3 days, and do not have food to eat. And if I dismiss them unfed to their home, they shall faint on the way, for some of them have come from far. And his taught ones answered him, How shall anyone be able to feed these people with bread here in the desert? And he asked them, How many loaves do you have? And they said, 7. And he commanded the crowd to sit down on the ground. And taking the 7 loaves, giving thanks, he broke them and gave them to his taught ones to set before them. And they set them before the crowd. And they had a few small fishes. And having blessed, he said to set them also before them. And they ate and were satisfied, and they picked up 7 large baskets of broken pieces. And those eating were about 4,000, and he dismissed them. And immediately, entering into the boat with his taught ones, he came to the parts of Dalmanutha. And the Pharisees came out and began to dispute with him, seeking from him a sign from heaven, trying him. And sighing deeply in his spirit, he said, Why does this generation seek a sign? Truly, I say to you, no sign shall be given to this generation. And leaving them, again entering into the boat, he went away to the other side. And they had forgotten to take bread, and they did not have more than 1 loaf with them in the boat. And he was warning them, saying, Mind, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and of the leaven of Herodes. And they were reasoning with one another, saying, Because we have no bread. And Yahshua, being aware of it, said to them, Why do you reason because you have no bread? Do you not yet perceive nor understand? Is your heart still hardened? Having eyes, do you not see? And having ears, do you not hear? And do you remember? And do you not remember? When I broke the 5 loaves for the 5,000, how many baskets filled with broken pieces did you pick up? They said to him, 12. And when I broke the 7 for the 4,000, how many large baskets filled with broken pieces did you pick up? And they said, 7. And he said to them, How do you not understand? And he came to Bethsaida, and they brought a blind man to him, and begged him to touch him. And taking the blind man by the hand, he led him out of the village. And having spit in his eyes, laying hands on him, he asked him, Do you see at all? And he looked up and said, I see men like trees walking. Then he placed his hands on his eyes again, and made him look up. And he was restored, and saw all clearly. And he sent him away to his home, saying, Do not go into the village. And Yahshua and his taught ones went out to the villages of Caesarea Philippi. And on the way he asked his taught ones, saying to them, Who do men say I am? And they said to him, Yochanan the Immerser, and others, Eliyahu, but others, one of the prophets. And he asked them, And you, who do you say I am? And Kepha answering said to him, You are the Messiah. And he warned them that they should speak to no one about him. And he began to teach them that the Son of Adam has to suffer much, and be rejected by the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed, and after 3 days to rise again. And he was speaking about this openly. Then Kepha, taking him aside, began to rebuke him. And turning around and seeing his taught ones, he rebuked Kepha, saying, Get behind me, Satan, for your thoughts are not those of Elohim, but those of men. And calling near the crowd with his taught ones, he said to them, Whoever desires to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his stake and follow me. For whoever desires to save his life shall lose it, but whoever loses his life for the sake of me and the good news, he shall save it. For what shall it profit a man if he gains all the world and loses his own life? Or what shall a man give in exchange for his life? For whoever is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinning generation, of him the son of Adam also shall be ashamed, when he comes in the esteem of his Father with the set apart messengers.
Okay, so when we start this section in chapter 7, verse 31, we see Yeshua healing one who was deaf. And then having gone over the waters, came to the Decapolis, and they fed the 7,000. And they brought one who was blind, and he opens the eyes of the blind. So we see two miracles. 4,000, sorry, feeding of the 4,000, yes. Besides women and children. Okay, okay, so already he'd done a miracle with them in Israel when he fed the 5,000. And we see now with him going with his taught ones in a boat, and as they were going, they were obviously hungry. Between the 12 of them, there's only one loaf of bread. It's like, whoa, we're hungry, we don't have enough bread. And when they were thinking, when he said, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and of Herodes, he thought, but we've only got this little bread here. So they were still not grasping the understanding of what he was doing by what he was teaching and the miracles that he was performing. As a fulfillment of when Yochanan says, look who's come, the one who opens the eyes of the blind, who opens the ears of the deaf. You know, and here he was coming. The nice picture that we see between the 5,000 and the 4,000 that were fed, with the 5,000, they picked up 12 baskets. It's a representation of the fullness of the house of Israel being picked up and gathered. Okay, the bread, community, and out of the pieces. So the broken is brought together and it's brought in baskets. So it's a representation of the fullness of the nations coming in, the full house. The feeding of the 4,000, going into the Decapolis. Decapolis means 10 cities. So again, it's a shadow picture parable of why our master came, for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. The house of Israel is 10 tribes that were scattered. And the Decapolis represented the foreign nations. And so with him going and bringing the good news and feeding the 4,000 there, and then 7 baskets being picked up, 7 we know represents the number of completion, especially with the 7 days a week, the 7 millennia, the 7 feasts, the 7 lamps on the lampstand. We see the 7 times the sprinkling of blood on the slaughter place. We understand the fullness of him coming to recover eyesight, to recover hearing, to bring a healing and bring his body back together. And this is something that he then asked his taught ones, who do they say he is? You know, well, some say you're a prophet, some say Yirmeyahu, some say, you know, Yochanan the Immerser. I mean, they obviously knew he wasn't Yochanan the Immerser. They were following him and everything. Yochanan was in prison, got beheaded. I mean, they knew that. But he turns to them and he says, who do you say I am? And Kepha said, you are the Messiah. Now, this is a clear witness that he was not able to say except by the set-apart Spirit. Today, I mentioned a Hebrew word that we discussed in terms of Aaron and his sons being anointed, and that's mashach, to smear. And from that to smear, we get Mashiach, which is anointed, because it's the one who's been smeared. Okay? Now, when we're seeing this term, you are the Messiah, we got to go to Yirmeyahu and a lot of prophecies that are contained in Yirmeyahu, which for me is a nice parallel mirror from renewed writings and Tanakh with the revelation that Yochanan was given of Yeshua Messiah. Yahweh makes it very clear that he is the Messiah. Now, the root word when Yahweh says, I am your Messiah, is not from the word mashach, but it's from the root word yasha, which is to save. So, Kepha was not saying you are the anointed one. Of course, he is the anointed one. He was saying you are the Savior that we've been waiting for. And he warned them that he shouldn't speak to anyone about him. He began to teach about how now he's going to suffer. The son of Adam would have to suffer much. And a lot of times, obviously, it wasn't grasped. They weren't grasping it because Kepha turns around and he says, I'll defend you. And he says, get behind me, Satan. On one breath, Kepha's acknowledging that you are the Savior. And the second thing he's saying, I'm not going to let anybody take you. They're going to kill me. When Yeshua says they're going to kill me, it's like, Kephas, no ways. I'm not going to let them do that. Get behind me, Satan. Because he was now trying to approach it from a fleshly perspective, one that has not had eyes fully opened to understand, And he makes it very clear here that this is now you've got the reality. You've got to follow me or not. Because if you follow me, you're going to have life. And even as Messiah came to die in the flesh of man, but be raised again, so too, if we have to suffer death, we know we have an eternity with him. And therefore, we shouldn't be running after the world and what the world has to offer to think that that's what establishes who we are, but rather our identity should be secure in Messiah. And when we secure in Messiah, we are content. It doesn't mean we don't enjoy the blessings that he gives us and strive to perfect our giftings and talents to his esteem. It doesn't mean we just sit back and say, I don't need to be successful. He will make your way prosperous and successful, but this isn't a prosperity message, What we see here, he's making it very clear that if you therefore are chasing after things, we spoke earlier about the fear of man versus the fear of Elohim. If you're going to subject yourself because of the fear of what others are saying, then you're denying him. And when you are, that shows that you're ashamed of him. And at this stage, when he was now feeding multitudes, they were just marveling because they got fed and saw miracles. But only a few were following him. In fact, the few that were following him were also now being persecuted for following him. You could stand and say, and that's why he said, who do you say I am? What's your witness of me? And if you can't boldly declare that I am Yahweh, your Savior, then you're actually ashamed of me. Because if you can't, and this is a lesson for all of us where we are in our workplaces or wherever we find ourselves, if we can't let his light shine in and through us and be a reflection of that. It doesn't mean we're out there Bible bashing people. That's not what I'm saying. But our life should reflect something that's unique and different from the rest of the world. It's the way we speak, the way we handle situations, the way we do things. We don't cut corners. It's all in the detail. Because when we do it right, we show that we're not ashamed of who we are subject to, who we are submitting to, Because when we then resort to cutting corners and mixing our worship, here's another thing we just touched in Yirmeyahu. When you mix your worship, you're actually ashamed of the true Messiah. Whether you like to realize it or not, but that's what it comes down to. Because you either follow him and forsake all for his sake, and therefore then he says, whoever is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinning generation, he will be ashamed when he comes in the esteem of his Father and the messengers, And so we see the esteem of the Father is a picture of him prophesying clearly to his taught ones that Yochanan says, we saw the esteem of Elohim as of a son brought forth of a father. Now he's saying, when I come in the esteem of the Father, Chazon gives us the clue here. The Son is saying, the one who overcomes, I'll be a father to them. So he's saying, I'm still coming in the fullness of being that which is your covering. So with all the things that were happening here, there's a clear separation that was taking place while many were being healed because he came. He healed whoever came to him. But there are people who have their ears open, who have their eyes open, that end up still not following. There are people that get fed, that still don't follow. And that's why it says this wicked and adulterous generation that he says here, he says they seek after signs. And a lot of the crowds and things followed for the signs. You see, we don't need signs to determine, like the confession of Kepha, he wasn't making this on the signs, it's because he was walking with him. So in that walking with him, Kepha wasn't surprised, if you will, at the signs. I mean, it must have been such a marvel to see these things happening. Let's not play it down. But it comes back to obedience over sacrifice. Because with obedience comes sacrifice. There's a difference. Any thoughts on this passage? Okay, here's Carol. Let's try and settle this question that she has here. I've been trying to understand the link between the royal priesthood and the Levitical priesthood. I couldn't hear much though due to bad network on my side, keeps breaking. We'll have to download when you've posted the video and listen properly later. So, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good idea. Listen later, and you're welcome to contact me afterwards and I can guide you a bit further there. Then let's go to the book of Hebrews, because that's all about the Levitical priesthood. Hebrews chapter 8, verse 1 to 6. Okay.
Now, the summary of what we are saying is this. We have such a high priest who is seated at the right hand of the throne of the greatness in the heavens, and who serves in the set-apart place and of the true tent, which Yahweh set up and not man. For every high priest is appointed to offer both gifts and slaughters. So it was also necessary for this one to have somewhat to offer. For if indeed he were on earth, he would not be a priest, since there are priests who offer the gifts according to the Torah, who serve a copy and shadow of the heavenly, as Moshe was warned when he was about to make the tent. For he said, "See that you make all according to the pattern shown to you on the mountain." But now he has obtained a more excellent service, inasmuch as he is also mediator of a better covenant, which was constituted on better promises.
I think we read the second section a couple of weeks ago, didn't we? Not sure if it's worth, but anybody, I encourage you to go read the rest of the chapter. But when it starts this chapter, this is the summary of what we're saying. It literally is the summary of what we're saying. And it hopefully answers a lot of questions, because everything Moshe did, exactly according to the pattern he was shown on the mountain, was a shadow picture. It served as a copy and shadow of the heavenly. So it was a reflection. As it is in heaven, let it be done here on earth. So we understand that with our master coming, and it carries on, and that's the thing, finding fault with them, finding fault with the earthly execution of the pattern. Not the pattern on earth, but the execution of the pattern on earth. He found fault. That's why he came to earth, to establish the clear standard of the pattern that is always reflected in the heavens. And as I mentioned earlier about the right hand and the right earlobe and the right toe and the right side, well, here's another picture again that I mentioned earlier, seated at the right hand of the throne of the greatness in the heavens. That is not a separate seat or a separate chair next to the throne. This is clear language of work completed in terms of that which he came to do. He came to establish the pattern that is in the heavens, that was corrupted on earth. He came to fix in his blood. And therefore, sitting down at the throne of the greatness of heavens is a picture of, I've completed what I came to do. And I've taken into the heavens, so that which Moshe was shown as a shadow and copy of has now been firmly established as the pattern that is in heaven and on earth by the blood of Yeshua Messiah. Him as high priest now, not needing to ordain a fleshly high priest every time one dies or one sins and all the offerings, because he offered himself once for all. Because if he was on earth, he'd have to do like the priesthood was doing and offer daily offerings and everything else. But he's now come to set matters straight. Not that what the service on the earth was wrong in its design, but the people administering it were found faulty. And even if they were found to be doing it perfectly, it was always a copy and shadow of what he is in the heavens and came to reveal perfectly before all here on earth. Any thoughts on today's readings? We can never fully understand the book of Hebrews if we don't understand the Torah of all the offerings. And we're still going to continue through Vayikra and everything else that the Levitical priesthood had to administer, and the instructions that were given to equip the rest of the nation to be guarded by the presence of Yahweh through their wilderness journey. So maybe a better way to understand it is he did not come to totally discard the pattern. The pattern that was done here was a shadow and copy of. So now the original came forth. The original document, if you will. Because here's the Word made flesh. Okay, any closing questions, comments from anybody? I encourage you to keep encouraging one another every day. Fan into flame, keep that fire burning. We'd also love any messages from you guys, emails, WhatsApp, signals, telegrams, however you like to communicate. We welcome that. There's some things we don't communicate with, but we've got a few. We don't use the TikToks and the... Like the what?
In the post office.
Oh, like the no, I think our post office is non-existent, so
It just disappeared.
it's somehow just disappeared. So anyway,
TikTok is not communication.
no.
It's one way.
Sure, let's not get down that road. Let's keep the pattern clean. Okay, so that's our readings for today. Today's Torah portion started with tzav, which is command. We looked at Yirmeyahu, where Yahweh said, "You did not obey my voice." We've looked here now at the renewed writings and Yeshua bringing about a clear miracles and provision, then asking his taught ones, who do you say I am? And it was a clear revelation of the witness by what he had done and what he declared, that they could boldly say by the Spirit of Yahweh that he is the Savior. And therefore comes the clear, when Kepha thought he could defend him, basically he was saying, stop boasting in your own strength, boast that you know me, because you just confessed me. And trust me, don't be ashamed of me, don't worry about whether they have to kill the body, because we've got a high priest who is in the heavens forever. We've got a high priest and king in the order of Melchizedek that we know is from the beginning and has established a clear deliverance for us to work out if we choose to. And if we don't, well, we'll join with the rest of the bones that the beasts and birds will feast on. No, I wouldn't like to be part of that. So let us not be people that are rejected for lack of knowledge, rejected for lawlessness, but in the beloved, let us be accepted because we have submitted to his ways and we have accepted the fact that he is the commander. We are his bride, his subjects, his chosen ones that are to be a light of his presence, and therefore let's do it with great joy and gladness and keep that fire burning. Don't let his word go out for a second. Amen. Let's pray. Master Yahweh, we bless you. We thank you that you've given us all that we need for life and reverence, and we thank you that we can sit here at your feet and be immersed in your truth that sets us free. We have so much to be thankful for. There's so much that we've read today, and I think we would just continue to ask that you just make it more and more clear to us. Open up even further nuggets of that which we meditate on and what we've been through today. As you continue to strengthen us in your truth, equip us with your truth, and set us apart in your truth, that we can stand firm, lifted hands in praise and thanksgiving unto your name in complete set apartness and truth. In the name of Yahushua our Messiah. Amen and amen.